Welcome to the Center of Light Radio with spiritual teacher, intuitive, musician, composer, and best-selling author of The Divine Principle, Anchoring Heaven on Earth, your host, Keith Anthony Blanchard.
Hello, everyone. Keith Anthony Blanchard here, your host. Lots of new changes are afoot. Center of Light Radio is now going to be a 2-hour show. So I had a thought to contact a friend of mine, brand new friend, Mr. Brad Olsen, about some of the work he's been doing. I've been watching on social media. Normally, Center of Light Radio airs Monday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. But Brad was going to be jetting out of town. He's going to contact in the desert, and boy, I cannot wait to talk to him about some of that cool stuff. So this was spontaneous, and believe it or not, I've been living my whole life in front of a microphone, and I feel butterflies in my stomach. And just throwing this all together really quickly. So we're not going to talk too much. I don't know too much about Brad, who's going to be my guest today. And we're going to be talking about a discussion into the esoteric. And so without any further ado, let me bring my brand new friend, Mr. Brad Olsen, onto the show.
Hey there,
buddy.
Keith. Thanks for having me on the show. It's nice to make your acquaintance and have this discussion.
So what are we talking about today, sir? I know you're involved with a lot of different things, and you're really good at them all. So tell me what we're doing.
So I just came back from Florida. I did the Consciousness 2.0 conference with Mary Ellen Popick and Reverend John Polk, who you both know.
Yeah.
It was a very successful event. We had a couple extra days and did some of the theme parks around Orlando, but we did another trip out to Cape Canaveral and Titusville and went in search of these bog people, which are up to 10,000 years old, one of the oldest civilizations in North America. And tell you more about that trip. But just to get you caught up, I'm heading down to Contact in the Desert on Thursday, and it's back-to-back-to-back trips. Just did a Memorial Day camp out with a bunch of friends of mine up here in the Sierra foothills, and it's busy summer so far, and I'm actually looking to book a ticket down to South America this winter, which will be their summer.
To do what?
Do some traveling in the megalithics.
I see.
Yeah.
I thought it was for some plant medicine or something.
Maybe. 4 months will give me a lot of time to do a lot of that stuff. And also to check out the trail of the runaway Nazis and San Carlos de Bariloche, and maybe even take a shot down to the southern tip of Patagonia and see if I can get on a boat out to Antarctica. Then I'd have all 7 continents under my belt.
How far do you think they're going to let you out to Antarctica?
Well, of course, you can go on the tourist route and just sort of get off and take some photos of penguins. Of course, what I want to see is the good stuff. And, yeah, that's a matter of debate how far they'll let me travel around down there. But I was just looking at flights before you called, and I'm just about ready to take the plunge. And I want to do it before Contact because my talks next year on the lecture circuit could very well be what I find as an investigative journalist, going down there and checking some stuff out. And
is that your background, journalism?
It is. It's more of a marketing, advertising was what I got into, but I'm also an artist, so had the multiple hat wearing experience getting into publishing in 1995, I should say, and started my own business called CCC Publishing, and I publish other authors now. So I have an opportunity to use many various skills, but in this case with the South America trip, I would certainly be wearing my investigative reporter hat.
You mentioned the contact. I know what you mean, but for a lot of people who are going to be coming across this broadcast may not really know exactly not only what you meant by contact, but even contact in the desert. What is contact in the desert for those who may not know about this particular event, powerful event?
It's about the biggest UFO prefab confab conference in the country. The biggest names. It's mostly like ancient alien folks, but a lot of other people who are involved in UFO research and these other paranormal subjects. One of the biggest events of its kind in this country, so I'm really honored to be asked back as a speaker for this event.
Why the interest?
Well,
Meaning
just the
in
big
all of
names
the, in
that they
this
draw.
field, what prompted you to move into, out of the
Okay,
box?
well, yeah, because I started out as a travel writer and did 6 of my 9 books were in the travel field. In fact, the last series of books I did before I moved over into the esoteric book series were on sacred places. And so that's another reason I want to go down to South America and do all the Inca sites and Lake Titicaca. But they're also, what I found when I was doing these sacred places books is a lot of times these really important locations for humanity, and they've been there for sometimes thousands of years, are also hotbed for paranormal activity, for UFO sightings, for sometimes Bigfoot or other crypto creatures seen in the area. So it's interesting that there is this tie-in between the sacred places world and also the paranormal UFO world.
So the next question is going to be: have you had your share? First,
I've had a few, yeah.
Would you
Not
like to
any
share
face
one?
to face, not any
Right.
abductions that I recall, but I've seen anomalous lights on many occasions, including just last summer up at the Esoteric Ranch with James Gilliland and Clyde Lewis
Wow.
was doing the Ground Zero.
I was interviewed by James some years ago.
He's a
That
great
place, talk
guy.
about a hotbed.
Oh yeah, you ever heard about the Esoteric Ranch?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, the place is really amazing.
And so I hear from a lot of people, they say that, 10 o'clock, 10:30, whatever time at night when it feels right, that they see these craft physically fly into the mountain,
Yeah,
like right through the wall of the mountain.
correct. You do. And they're light orbs and all sorts of anomalous lights above, mid-range out down the mountain, and as you said, coming and going, disappearing. So being the adventurous athletic guy I am, I decided to go up to Mount Adams with a couple hiker friends of mine, and we went up there to see if there was any chance that those lights could be Jeeps or motorcycles or in the wintertime snowmobiles. No chance. I mean, this is one of the most inhospitable environments on the slopes of Mount Adams that I've ever seen. Just to try to free climb scramble would be very dangerous because not only are there sheer walls, but the lava rock is so spiky and sharp that it could, if you don't have the right pair of shoes, it could shred your boots. So you have to be a very experienced climber to go to this one section, which is the west-facing slope of Mount Adams. And for your listeners who are not sure where that's at, it's right on the southern edge of Washington State, literally only about 20 or 30 miles from the Columbia River, which is the border to northern Oregon. And and on that west-facing slope, which is so inhospitable, no roads, no way that those lights could have anything been other than airborne area orbs or some kind of vehicle, but it's facing right towards Mount St. Helens, which you can see and is starting to rumble again, as are many volcanoes around the world. And indeed, Mount Adams may be connected to that volcanic vent. So my point is that here's Mount St. Helens, which is also very well known for Bigfoot sightings and paranormal events. And here you have Mount Adams, not 10 miles away, this hotbed of UFO activity. And when I had my first sighting in 1997, I wrote about it in the forward section of my book, Future Esoteric. It was up at Crater Lake in southern Oregon. And myself and a few hikers were up near the top point of Crater Lake, and we saw this streaking light, bright white light, several seconds in the sky, and then it just broke up into these perfect square blips as it made its way into the depths of Crater Lake. And we just fell to the ground laughing. It was so amazing. We started running up the hill to see if our other friends had seen it, and we saw the exact same phenomenon over Mount Shasta. Common denominator here, 4 volcanoes in the Cascade Range What's the connection? Well, the connection is UFO sightings quite regularly. And I know people who live up there in Mount Shasta, and they say, we see stuff all the time. And that's, of course, what James Gilliland says at ESETI. So it got me on this search because I wrote about these locations as sacred places in my book, Sacred Places North America, and thought there's something more to this story. And indeed, I found out that most UFO sightings around the world occur above or near volcanoes. So then it begs the question, what is with a volcano that would be so important to UFO craft? Well, it could be a heat energy source. It could also be a large cavity below the mountain where these ships, if they can transfer their mass through the wall of the mountain, which it appears they were doing at Mount Adams, they might have a place that they can park or dock a ship and basically be underground. So that kind of got me started on the whole notion of following this information and using the background of sacred places and traveling and putting it into the context of a new series of books that I did called the Esoteric series. And there's 2 books out. I'm working on a third, and actually this trip to South America would help me fill in some of the final gaps to the third and final book in this series called Beyond Esoteric, The Ultimate Journey. And if I get down to Antarctica, that would be the ultimate journey. So long story short, the first 2 books are called, first book is Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses. And that's the entire history of esoteric subject matter up to this modern age. And then Future Esoteric deals more with the UFO, ET, enigma, and the secret state that's kept all this information bottled up for so long.
I know that you're very big into the disclosure movement.
Yes.
That's the new golden ticket. Everybody's, it's the new thing. It's the new spiritual metaphysical trend. I mean, when Corey and David started the whole thing, it started way before that. But they're the ones that brought it to the mainstream.
Sure.
Tell me what about all that. I love talking to people about their passion, and I love it. You're a passionate man, and you're pursuing your fire. That's just juicy to me. What about the disclosure project interests you? Is it the fact that for example, there are a lot of people who they're so excited about, the presence of UFOs, but they never really give any consideration to the beings flying the craft. They're just wowed about the hardware instead of the cosmic divine brother or sister that's, navigating the machine. And a lot of these machines are alive. They create a symbiotic relationship with the pilots, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me about your passion in the disclosure thing.
Sure. Well, quite frankly, disclosure is the biggest issue of our time. Yeah. If it were done correctly, we're talking about a game changer for the human race. It would just change everything we think we know about our reality, technology, how we treat each other, even being able to feed the whole world, and so many other things. It would completely change who we are on this planet and our relationship with each other and the animals and the planet itself. So you can't imagine how big of a difference this is going to be. But look what we're up against. We're up against big oil. We're up against money. We're up against systems that have been in place for many centuries that want to keep the control the way it is.
So in essence, Brad, cosmic disclosure could be truly seen as the beginning of heaven on earth for collective humanity.
That's correct.
Oh,
and
that's
in the final section,
delicious.
In the final section of my book, Future Esoteric, the section is called Utopia, because what do we do with this technology after we are privy to this information? And look, the reason why UFOs have been suppressed for so long, and we're talking 70 plus years since Roswell, it's not so much that the controlling elite, whatever we want to call them, the cabal, Illuminati, New World Order, basically the Western controllers who have a stake in maintaining the status quo, they don't care so much if we're talking about aliens and how they look and how many scales they have, or what is it about them that intrigues us. What they're worried about is question number 2, which is, okay, there's aliens. They came here on exotic propulsion craft. Question number 2 is, how'd they do it? And what kind of machinery are they flying? And clearly they're not using oil, gas, nuclear, or coal to propel their rockets to get here. So they're using some kind of exotic propulsion energy. And that's where the whole silencing of disclosure
So
basically
it's not
takes on.
necessarily, they don't give a rat's ass if we know about aliens or say hi to them or, have one come over for a sleepover. They don't care about any of that. They're worried
Not
about
necessarily,
suppressing the technology.
Right. Right.
Dear
Because keep in
Lord.
mind, energy is the #1 industry on this planet. Okay.
Well,
So,
actually, it's sought out throughout the universe. Everybody is looking to acquire energy.
right. And if, let's say, some of these craft were examined, and they already have been, but this information has been bottled up. If it were to come out that these craft fly via some kind of free energy device, well, that's a game changer. And that would basically send the energy industry into the tanks. Because why would we want to pollute? Why would we want to pay for it? If it's free energy, it's free. And Tesla was working on this in his world system over 100 years ago, and he was ruthlessly suppressed. So all we got to do is basically start where Tesla left off with the Wardenclyffe Tower, and we'll start moving into understanding this technology a lot more, and then a widespread application. But what we say in the disclosure movement is disclosure's happening from the ground up. We can't hold our breath and wait for the governments of the world to just say, hey, well, guess what? We're going to tell you all about these ET craft we've been watching for the last few decades. That's not going to happen. So we're forcing it from a grassroots level and making disclosure come from the people like us in interviews like this, and letting people make up their own mind.
Yeah. And I think people are making up their mind. I think some people may not they may believe in all this extraterrestrial technology stuff. They're just not, they're not interested beyond just the normal give it a once over. But I have said in a lot of my presentations when I do my Bursts of Light Live, I strongly suggest you update yourself on as much information as possible. You don't have to believe it. Just open a file and store it. So if a time comes and you need it, you're ready and available to implement whatever you need. Because there can come a time that if you ignore what's happening, that the lives you are living will take a backseat to what's going on all around you. That would not be a happy day in one's life.
No, and to just not pay attention to what is the potential of this disclosure is doing yourself a disservice, because many of these technologies could very well not only benefit the human race, but benefit us personally, such as some of the new discoveries about the future of medicine. Like Tesla said, you want to understand the nature of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Well, it turns out these very things are also being used in the future of medicine. And this is very advanced medical technology, but I had just happened to have met a top leading Stanford University cardiologist, and I quizzed him on this. He gave me a ride when I was going to Aspen, Colorado in March. My flight got delayed to Grand Junction, and my dad lives in Carbondale, and the bus wasn't going to stop there, and it was too late for my dad to drive back up. So I was kind of in a hard place, and this guy just comes up and says, hey, I'm not going to get on the bus. I got my own car. I said, hey, any chance you could just drop me off right on your way up? He's like, sure, jump in. So I quizzed him, and it turns out he's like multi-millionaire, very wealthy guy going to Snowmass to do a lecture called The Future of Medicine. I said, well, I do some research on this too, and I've heard that light can be part of a healing process. For example, if you go into any Whole Food restroom, you turn on the light, it's a black light. It's killing the bacteria on the spot with light. that's one thing. And I asked him about sound and frequency, and he said, indeed, they're already using frequency type devices to blow up ulcers in people's bodies. I'm thinking to myself, this sounds very much like Royal Raymond Rife, who had a machine that could do this 85 years ago. And he, of course, was ruthlessly suppressed when he was using it to remove cancer from terminally ill cancer patients. And again, this technology has been ruthlessly suppressed. And if it were just to come back to what some of these great inventors came up with, we would find that there are many applications, not only to make this a clean energy planet, but as I mentioned, also to extend our lives and make us healthier and live longer. But there does seem to be a concerted effort to have us use our working years and then drop dead right when we start collecting Social Security. No real incentive to keep us living more than, say, 65 years old.
It doesn't serve the narrative, the ginger. So, Brad, how would you support those people who are coming across this presentation today about cosmic disclosure? Let's get into just a little bit of what Corey and David and others like yourself, what is cosmic disclosure as they're presenting it? What is it? You know, some people have heard me do presentations talk about what's going on the dark side of the moon. You've heard me do broadcast about my alien human hybrid friend Nucleus 8, who is head of security for this quadrant of our galaxy 27,000 light years away. This is a lot of wow factor stuff for people to wrap their minds around. Can you share with the listening audience a little more about cosmic disclosure? What is all that?
Sure. Well, this is also the name of David Wilcock's show on Gaia TV. I've done some work with Gaia. I've been out to their studio in Boulder, Colorado on George Nuri's show called Beyond Belief. So David Wilcock has a list of whistleblowers and contacts he uses, including Corey Goode, who's on his show quite a bit. And they're basically outlining the whole concept of a secret space program, of exotic craft that have been backward engineered, but we're not being told about this stuff, as well as people who have joined some of these corps and have gone up on multi-year missions. And someone like Corey Goode will tell you, yeah, he lived a couple years up on Mars. How do you do that? Well, there's ships that can get you there, or there's the jump room that.
But also in Corey's experience, Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, when he goes to work, he's at his house in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden this blue orb, or whatever size, let's just for the sake of this example, an orb the size of a grapefruit shows up in his house, basically asking him, "Are you ready?" And Corey affirms, "Yes, I am." And the blue orb engulfs him. 2 minutes later, he's on the dark side of the moon hanging out with ambassadors from all over the world and 22 alien civilizations.
Right. Well, there's no way I could vet that testimony. It's certainly compelling to consider what if, and I always consider what if. And I've met Corey Goode. I sat in on an interview with him with Linda Moulton Howe, and it was incredible, the things he was saying. And I don't think he's really proud of some of the things he said or did or saw. And I saw the guy physically shaking, and they specifically said no cameras on this interview, no recording in any way. Just let Linda ask some questions. It's her interview. And I was sitting right next to Linda, just looking at him like I'm looking at you. And he was visibly shaken on a few things that he mentioned, as far as seeing people being transported off planet against their will and not being able to do anything to assist them if they're requesting to be let go. So there are some things in the whole secret space program that have a dark side, and perhaps they're looking at a way to resolve that before they make a big disclosure. But again, I wouldn't hold my breath that that's going to happen. It will happen from people like David Wilcock interviewing Corey Goode, or Emery Smith, who says he worked on autopsies of several hundred ET types.
I like Emery.
Yeah, and
a cool cat.
So, yeah, this puts together a comprehensive package that we can start seeing that it is a very diverse universe out there. It's a multiverse, really, and it's filled with many kind of creatures that can be here with us like now in the third dimension, or as they described in the 19th century esoteric books, are the etherics, or what we might know as angels, or what we might now know as shapeshifters that can materialize in and out of our reality. And so we're just on the very early learning curve cusp of comprehending what this means, because we're so stuck here in our third dimensional reality, it would be hard to imagine that a being could transition right through the wall here.
Star Wars is not far-fetched. In fact, it's exactly just like that. The saga, it's teeming with life everywhere.
I've heard that too.
You know, I went to see, what was the movie, Solo yesterday. I really enjoyed it. It just reminding me of being connected to the cosmos. You know, you're talking about the angelics. I mean, it's all real.
Yeah.
Where did even the things that we call myths, where did they come from? They come from some element of truth. Yeah, Brad?
Oh, I would say. And I had an opportunity to meet Zachariah Shitchkin before he passed away. It was very brief at a book show. Just a tiny little diminutive man, and he was signing books. And I really enjoy your work. 12th Planet really rocked my world. Oh, thank you very much. Who should I sign it to? And so if you look at some of his research and going back and studying these cuneiform texts out of Mesopotamia, describing how the human race may have been created. Now, 50 or 100 years ago, well, 50 years ago when Shitchkin was working on this stuff, it must have seemed a fantastic notion to think that the human race could have been genetically engineered. Nowadays, well, we had Dolly the sheep 20 years ago, and nowadays they're even admitting they can clone humans. So this is the reality we live in now, and it shouldn't come as much of a shock to people to think that there could have been ET civilizations in our past who may have done some manipulation to this human race. And indeed, there could be many races existing within one as well. And my talk down in Contact in the Desert next Saturday is going to be the forbidden archaeology of ancient giants in our past, and the fossil record shows it. The Egyptian hieroglyphic record shows it. Newspaper articles from the 19th century when they were digging up all the mound sites here in North America shows 8, 9, 10-foot giants. Well, humans don't live that big. So we're either talking about a major mutation in humanity or a different race of people that could have lived here. And so I start my talk by just basically saying, consider the fact that Earth has been a habitable, breathable planet for millions of years. So when you have a huge amount of time, even during the time of the dinosaurs, where people could have lived here in small little colonies, or perhaps the just like the Bible said, the Anunnaki, the fallen angels, the Nephilim, could have also occupied this planet for a period, buried their dead, done some genetic tinkering to get the Cro-Magnon man out of like the ape-like state and more into a modern slave-like state, which is what Shitchkin would say that humans were genetically engineered to do, to be a slave race to mine gold. And in fact, a friend of mine, Michael Tellinger, he's going to be at Contact in the Desert as well, has done much research where he's from, down in South Africa, looking at some of the oldest civilization on the planet. It's not out of Mesopotamia, it's out of South Africa. And of course, we know that there's a lot of gold mines down in South Africa, as well as a lot of remnants of a very old civilization that centered around some of these ancient gold mines. So it all kind of ties in when you factor in what many of these researchers have said. And I'm just a guy who's kind of articulating the big picture here and saying it's quite possible that humans have been genetically mutated and altered. And then you factor in the Rh negative blood type, which is like another subset of humans within the human race. And once again, more data points suggesting that we were a created race. And while I certainly believe evolution is a true and natural course that animals run, even the founder of DNA, Francis Crick, said that there's no way humans could have made that great leap from the great apes to humans in the short amount of time to have the sophisticated kind of DNA that we have.
It was intentional.
Right.
Well, that's
the big picture. That's the emerging picture here, is that we were intentionally created.
Center of Light Radio. My name is Keith Anthony Blanchard, your host. Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So you wonder why in the heck is he on the air right now? Well, I was actually going to start my new platform next week, but I saw Brad. I saw one of his posts today. I said, yeah, let's get this thing going. Actually, it was Brad's suggestion. I made contact with Brad because I wanted to get him on the show next week. So, Center of Light Radio, every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I am here. Brad, thank you for being here today, sir. I would like to know more about, you're talking about some of the oldest civilizations. What about the Agarthans? Aren't they supposedly the oldest human race to be in Earth, not on Earth?
That's right, in Earth, not on Earth. Well, that's right. And they would hearken back to, say, the Lemurian civilization prior to the Atlantis civilization. And they found refuge under the surface of the Earth. Best estimate, it's up on the Tibetan Plateau, in China, Mongolia, Western Europe. And I believe the Tibetans have known about them for a long time.
Right.
And probably gotten a lot of their technological advancements, such as auditive levitation. One show I was on in Ancient Aliens, I spoke about the site in Micronesia called Ponape, and how there's this very strange megalithic area called Non Madal on one side of the island in Micronesia. And they know on the other side of Ponape they had these big basalt, volcanic, kind of like Lincoln logs, but of course they weigh many, many tons. And to get them to the Non Madal site, they would have had to travel several hours over a water passage around a very rocky island and then set them up in place. And so one of the great mysteries of Non Madal is how did they do that? And the fact that the natives today consider it a haunted site and don't want anything to do with it and don't take any credit for it suggests that not only is this a very old site, but it was used and built by people who had some of this technology. And in my book, Future Esoteric, a chapter called Secret Sciences, in fact, my radio show called The Esoteric Circle on Wednesdays, I'm going to read the chapter of Secret Sciences and talk about auditive levitation on Wednesday on Revolution Radio and Late Night in the Midlands.
These monks done this through chanting, correct? Or did they use some sort of device, apparatus, machine?
Okay, so there was this Dr. Jarl from Sweden who knew one of the lamas. I think he was traveling through there and met them, and they liked him. He went back to Sweden. Then he got a telegram that one of the High Lamas was really sick, and they trusted him to come back. And he did. And he helped this High Lama and pretty much saved his life. This is in the 1930s. And then so the story goes, and Dr. Jarl kept a journal and drew what he saw. And so one day they said, we're going to take you to a location and show you something you've never seen before. And he drew a diagram, which I've reproduced in my book, Future Esoteric, to show people how they did it. Basically what they did was 3 concentric circles of monks, like a horseshoe shape, with a giant boulder in the middle. And it was kind of like in a bowl-shaped concave, and massive 2-ton boulder sitting there. And so it was a row of monk chanters, a row of drummers, and a row of trumpeters. And they would get some kind of beat going, some chant going, and their heads were all looked down, but the cacophony of sound kept growing higher and higher. And then as soon as the music and sound got to the highest point, the monks would look up, and right then the boulder would levitate and it would move over to a high cliff area where they were trying to move it. And Dr. Jarl was just floored in fascination. They did it multiple times. They moved other boulders. They would have an ox cart come in, drop the boulder, do the whole thing over and over again that he got to witness and wrote about in his journal. Apparently they did film it as well, a primitive black and white film, but as soon as he got back to Sweden, it was confiscated. So the secret sciences have been bottled up for well over a century as they try to make sense of what this technology is. And apparently, for some reason, auditive levitation is not something that the group who collects this information wants to share with the rest of us.
Brad, would you take this time to give out your contact information to the listening audience so they can find out more about you, the events you are participating in, and just your work overall?
Oh, sure. Yeah, if you want to find out more about me, my website is bradolsen.com, BRADOLSEN.com. And my book publishing site business is called CCC Publishing. That's also one word, 3Cs Publishing.com. And there you can see all the books that I've written, other authors that I publish. And we use the Google Books app so you can browse the books and check out this information. And if you buy the book off the site, I am able to sign it if it's one of my copies that comes out of my office. So I also have a YouTube channel called Esoteric Series and my radio show called the Esoteric Circle every Wednesday from 3 to 6 p.m. West Coast time. And it starts on Revolution Radio from 3 to 5 and then 4 to 6 on Late Night in the Midlands. So I'm on 2 networks for the same show. And this Wednesday, the secret sciences, including that auditive levitation information.
Very, very cool, Brad. Brad, out of all this stuff in the esoteric, what's your favorite? Man, what really gets you going, man? Oh,
well, really the technology that is associated with UFO research. So really the 0 point technology that could levitate a craft, that could create its own gravity field, the free energy technology. And Nassim Harriman is going to be a speaker at Contact in the Desert. I really hope I get a chance to meet him and talk to him. I'll certainly go see his presentation. He also is working in some of this technology as far as trying to get small free energy devices made to go mass market for the population. So I'd like to see where that project's at. I heard it's just about in the rollout phase, so we'll see where he says it's at on this weekend. And so that's what fascinates me, is the potential of using this backward engineering technology that we've known for decades and releasing it for the common good of humanity. And the next byproduct of doing that is we will start to have elevated consciousness because people will be living better. We could do away with starvation. We could even turn the deserts back into gardens. Because think about it, if we had desalinization plants with free energy, that's not an issue anymore. You could turn the Sahara Desert back into a garden. So we could restore this planet with this released technology. We could clean up the oceans. We could even restock the oceans with fish and other wildlife and create larger preserves in some of these marginalized areas where cattle ranching has basically decimated the rainforest. So there's a lot of potential to restore the planet, the health of this planet, and the human race if we were to get this technology released.
Bring it back to what it was intended to be, right?
Yeah, well, that comes with disclosure. That's the natural byproduct of having this information come out there, is you get disclosure and then you get all these benefits as a result. And that's why
there's a phenomenal parallel, Brad, between something that you said and something I talked about last night on a live feed, is that waiting on disclosure is never going to happen. We have to start this ourselves. The same thing with the prophecy of heaven on earth. Heaven on earth is not a future event. You're going to be waiting around for a long time. People are already moving into that window now by simply turning inward and making contact with that which lives in all of us. So I like the idea that you can't wait. It's you can keep putting it off. I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to do it tomorrow. And it never brings about. But when we become the change itself, for example, in the disclosure, the ones that are making it happen, the change itself, the ones that are manifesting their own heaven on this place, things get really, really cool really quick. So the technology that's going to be coming through cosmic disclosure, like you said, Brad, is going to be for the welfare of humanity. We're going to have free energy, better food. We're going to have And it's just all across the board technology. It's not, basically technology as you would think with alien devices and alien ships. That's not what we're referring to whatsoever.
That's right. Well, again, that would be like a byproduct. And
yes,
to talk about our exchanges with ET races is exopolitics. And Dr. Michael Sala is a very key member of this. He'll also be at Contact Desert, someone I know. Met him on the set of Ancient Aliens a few years ago, and see him now at these conferences, and we're really good friends. And his whole site is based on exopolitics, about bringing the cosmic disclosure information into the fold, bringing the technology into the fold, and more importantly, bringing the discussion of how the human race is going to interact with our cosmic brothers and sisters out there. There has to be a place for us.
It should be interesting.
It should be very interesting, but you got to think about how they look at us. And we still have warfare on this planet. We still have starvation. We're killing this planet off in so many ways. And this is like the Planet of the Apes down here. You can kind of imagine us going to an environment like that and seeing this kind of strife and being pretty hands-off as well. So I think they want to see us make the changes we need to make to improve our conditions on this planet first. But there are a few roadblocks we have to get through. And one of those roadblocks is disclosure. And as you mentioned, it has to come from the ground up. It already is. It's a grassroots effort.
So why they're interested in us? Why they're interested in us? Because they're nice beings and they want to help? Or is it because they're karmically bound that whatever strides we make, the whole galaxy and whoever's participating ascends as well?
Well, it's probably all the above, because they are also concerned with the welfare on this planet. One thing that Corey Good said to Linda Moulton Howe during this interview was some ET races don't even care about humans. They're just here to
right.
collect like a June bug from the Amazon rainforest. That's all they want.
Right.
That's all they're coming here for. So Earth is like a garden planet. Okay, it's this gem. It's a jewel. And if you look at the location where we are in the Milky Way galaxy, we're out on the outer ring. So first of all, you've got the inner part of the Milky Way galaxy with like a billion-year head start. Millions of years that intelligent races had before us. So they're interested in seeing us kind of like a kid brother finally coming of age. And what are you going to do with your life? Are you going to kill yourself and end up in jail or dead, or are you going to get along with the world and try to make it a better place? But again, we're the surface dwellers, and it's our karma and our responsibility to get it together among the human race. I think if we were able to exhibit that, it would be a very...
With my guest today, Mr. Brad Olsen, today we're talking about...
Yeah, the Dreamtime state, that's quite an enigma. I've traveled, as we all have, in these mysterious realms within our mind. I mean, dreams are interesting because they involve us and they involve people in our lives, but they can also take us to these mythical realms, almost like a utopian vision of what Earth could be. And I don't know what that means. It's almost like here's a carrot in front of the horse. Start running towards it and keep running, because this is where you could be someday. I'm not sure. Or maybe it's all just a hallucination in our mind, or maybe it's also a connection to the parallel universe. I've heard people say that before, that in the parallel universe, there's much like the circumstances we live here, even in Earth, even people like you and me, Keith, we have our doppelganger somewhere else. And maybe when we dream, we're going to visit there.
Can you imagine the possibility that it's infinite, that it doesn't stop? There's bandwidths, we're looking at channel 3 on the TV. You can bet your ass that channel 2 and channel 4 exist. You just got to shift your conscious dial. And this is right. Infinite. Life is teeming throughout this universe on every possible level, every possible nook and cranny.
It really is very expanding when you look at all the possibilities. Scientists tell us we have 13 dimensions living here, right here within us right now. But we can only really comprehend the third dimension, occasionally glimpses into the fourth. And can you imagine if we were able to start tapping into what's going on in these other dimensions? We would see that this is a very vastly complex and populated multiverse. I would even go so far as to say it's a holographic universe, and that maybe we're doing these marionette dances with our free will in this holographic field.
So we think it's our free will.
Yeah, we think. It seems so real because we can get hurt and we can bump into things, and it seems solid, but if you look at it on a molecular basis, the matter all around us is more hollow than it is solid.
99.99%. So, Brad, I've been going through this change within myself for the last 2 years. And I think people are hyper-focused or just really leaning in, or hoping would be the idea, that the idea of heaven on earth is going to come about, as we just talked a bit ago, in this future event, and the lions lay down with the lambs. Well, that's never going to happen until the lion and lamb lays down within ourselves. But for the last 2 years, Brad, something has come over me, or consuming me, or engulfing me, or swelling inside of me. It's this expansion of awareness. To make this point, let's say before those 2 years, we all have some expansion awareness about us, peripheral awareness. But the wall has fallen down for me, and it's so much so sometimes it's hard to keep up. It's hard to stay erect, to use the word in balance. But I allow myself to fall because I trust. It's not like I'm being wobbly or I'm not planted. It's just new, and I don't know how to be in that space. Do you feel an internal shift within you in the last however long of your life, more so than previous times in life? Do you feel something quickening inside of you?
Oh, I do. And I've often said the nice thing about getting older is we become wiser, and we can build upon our experiences. It's about the only good thing, really. I mean, when the body starts breaking down and we can't be as physical as we once were, you got to look at the bright side somewhere. And if you're not suffering from Alzheimer's or some degenerative mental property, then you do get wiser as you get older, and you can build upon your experiences and what you've learned and what you take in every day. I really think every day I get a little bit smarter than I was yesterday. I learn new things. I love talking to people. I'm very much a people person. You'll see me out at the table with my books, talking to people at Contacting the Desert just about as much as any other author. Some of them won't even show up. Some of them I don't even care if I sell any books. I'll just stay in my bungalow the whole time because they're either afraid of the audience.
I would be hanging out with you, man. I would be in the booth just chit-chatting.
And a lot of people hang out with me, and I love that. And it's not about me. I like to just talk about you and everything else. And so going to these conferences is really big honor for me too. It's even more so than doing like TV stuff, because you really learn. You can go face to face with some of these speakers and hear their presentations. It's better than watching a TV show. And if you're lucky, you get a chance to go one-on-one with them and ask some questions too. And that's the intangible part of these conferences that I really find are useful for my research and just expanding my knowledge base, getting wiser as we get older.
Brad, have you found how many, just pick a number off the top of your head, how many presentations in a big way, playing in a big arena like Contacting the Desert, have you done?
Oh, I do about 6 to 8 a year.
Okay.
And I'm basically cutting it off now. My last two are in October, middle October and late October. And then I'm going to take no interviews, no conferences for 4 months and do this trip to South America, put everything in autopilot. I had a great apartment in San Francisco, and a new owner bought it, and I was rent controlled, had my office there for 14 years. And
you recently moved. I saw that.
He booted me out. It was a no fault eviction. I got a little bit of a settlement, and I got some money saved, and I want to buy a house up in Lake Tahoe, where I love to ski, and I have some friends up there. But it's top of the game right now. It's top of the market. So I think I can buy myself some time and up to a year, see if anything changes. I think there's some financial turbulence in our future, and it might be a more opportune time to buy in 6 months or a year from now than right now.
Dig it. Excuse me. So, Brad, I want to ask you about when you that you have done all these presentations. Have you noticed any strange phenomena taking place? For example, we've seen take place with Corey Good and David. That they would go to an event, they do a presentation, but something would happen. Certain type of people would show up, if you get my drift, and they had a certain way about them, or
Oh yeah,
helicopters, and have you experienced that yourself?
oh yeah, yeah. We think that there's at least one plant that comes to every one of these conferences, and if you're paying attention, they usually show themselves who and what they are, pretty apparent. And the last two I did, the last two of last year in October, was at the Awareness Life Expo in Sedona, Arizona, and John Alexander came to see John D'Souza and watch the conference, and he's a pretty well-known UFO disinformationalist from the government. So I don't want to slag on John Alexander. I took a picture with him, and Leo Zagami, who features him in his Confessions of an Illuminati book that I publish, he's like, "Hey, Brad, I don't think I agree so much with your choice of friends there." And I said, "Well, Leo, you know the saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer." Well, that was my relation with John Alexander. And then we did back-to-back conferences. John Polk was with me and a bunch of our friends, and I was speaking at both. And then we went to the 5D event in Las Vegas just 2 weeks after the shooting at Mandalay Bay. Talk about a creepy feeling there. It was still a crime scene, tape up, cops all around there. And our hotel was just right kitty corner behind it. So John Polk and I did a walkthrough, and we got goosebumps. It was so creepy, and saw a lot of things that just didn't add up to the official narratives. Something
I love Mr.
clearly
Polk.
was going on there.
I interviewed John D'Souza about 6 months ago. I really enjoyed John.
Oh, great.
But
Yeah.
Mr. Polk, he's giving a presentation, and these blue people walk in.
Yeah. He wrote a book about it.
Yeah. I really enjoyed his talk. I believe the cat, that's for sure. I mean, I couldn't imagine sitting on the podium giving a talk, and all of a sudden an extraterrestrial race of beings just walk in and wants to have a dialogue with. Wasn't it about money? They had no idea of the concept of money. Is that what it was?
That's one thing, and you hear that often, including the Men in Black so they're like the dark side. The blue beings, according to John's narrative, was the lighter beings, and Travis Walton and a few other UFO people in the industry saw them. But the Men in Black also can't make sense of ballpoint pens. They don't know how to use simple utensils like a fork, and they don't have a concept of money. So who the heck are these people or entities? And it's people like that just give you the kind of the heebie-jeebies. You're like, ooh, you're one of them. And so we had one of those in the Vegas show, and he was just like leeching on to our group. Because I'm so gregarious, and I've got some friends that always meet me at these shows, we kind of get a little group, and then we go out afterwards, dinner, drinks, whatever. This guy just kind of glommed on and was pumping me for information primarily. And at one point he goes, "Well, what's a white hat?" I go, "Well, you're a white hat. You should be telling me." And at that point I was starting to get suspicious of the guy, and he gets up out of the room. I'm like, "Hey guys, I'm getting a bad feeling about Gregory here. I mean, just keep an eye on him. Tell me what you think when he comes back." And after dinner, everybody's like, "Ooh, I'm glad you pointed that out," because once you see it, it's almost like the magician's trick, right? Once you see how they do it, you'll never see that trick in the same way again. But unless,
right.
If you're still falling for the illusion, oh, he's one of us, he's really interested. And John Polk was doing his feng shui with him, and they were getting all into Tai Chi. And I'm like, John, just take a second and think about, who is this guy? He's ex-military, he's coming in. And so we were going up to Rachel, Nevada, to spend a night looking out over towards Area 51. This is last October after the 5D event. Big group of us were going. this guy wanted to come with really bad. I'm like, no, ditch him, man. Don't take his calls. And so then he started getting desperate, and he's like, well, I'm going to Area 51 anyways. I'm like, what? You're ex-military. I don't think they'll just let you in. And then he's calling Polk, and he's saying, oh, Area 51's under lockdown. You're not going to see anything out there. It's like, you are so disinfo, dude. So, yeah, you do get infiltrated. I don't think I've had the actual ET sighting like Reverend Polk has, but hey, I'm open to it. I'm a nice guy. I'm easily agreeable to talk to anybody, including ETs, putting it out there.
Yeah, and I heard it's just a simple, it's a true wanting of it. If you make yourself available,
correct,
it will present itself. You know, I was like I was telling you earlier about my experience with an alien human hybrid by the name of Nucleus 8 that I was fortunate to hang around with for 4.5 years. Brad, I saw this cat do things through me, in front of me, while my eyes are open, yanks me out of my body by pulling on my arm, grabbing my hand and tugging on it, and I leave my body like I'm pulling on his shirt through my arm. My consciousness leaves my body, and he shows me his planetary station. And I've seen some of the most phenomenal things, and some of the things he's told me about the truth of who he is and what he does. Completely convinced. Absolutely. No doubt whatsoever. He's 4,740 years old right now in one life. Their technology is such that before you die, they can rejuvenate you to live half that time. Mm-hmm. Again, right before you die, provided your head's not cut off, they can rejuvenate you half that time. After which you are spent, you go to another level of consciousness entirely. But I've had the opportunity to hang around this guy. His mother was a Gray. His father was an Egyptian king. He lives 27,000 light years away. He's head of security for this quadrant of the Milky Way galaxy. He literally roams the galaxy policing it. He has a team, and earlier you were talking about these monks. They would sit in these 3 concentric circles to where they would chant, and along with the musicians, and it would bring about things by the movement and the manipulation of energy. Well, Nucleus 8 told me the same thing, how they power their planetary station. There is a circle of monks that sits around this core, and they meditate into it, and that's what sustains the power grid in this particular place.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Right?
That doesn't fancy the imagination, what the potential with that is all about.
He told me a long time ago, now keep in mind, this was like 1998. He told me before the cosmic disclosure went mainstream that they were messing about on the dark side of the moon.
Oh, yeah. There's all kinds of things there. We've known that since the Apollo shots. They called it Santa Claus, and that was their code word for ETs when the first module, Apollo 11, went around the moon. They were just aghast at all the things they had seen.
Brad, in your findings, in your research, and in your intuition and or your opinion, did we go to the moon?
I think we did, yeah. I actually had a great little experience with Buzz Aldrin one time at a travel show, and there's Buzz Aldrin, and I just kind of shouted him, and I've always been interested in these subjects and always kind of remembering things relating to cosmic events, such as the Apollo 11 moon landing. So I'm at this travel show. I'm a pretty tall guy. Buzz is like average height, and he starts walking the floor after he did like sort of a meet and greet, and I did go up and say hello and honored to meet you, sir, and this and that, kind of disarming him. So he starts walking, and a few of us start following him, and sooner or later he kind of looks up. There's that tall guy again, and he goes, so what's on your mind? And I go, well, I got a burning question I want to ask you. On the return flight, there were reports that some orbs had followed you guys off the moon. And he just gave me this look with these steely blue eyes, and he's like, didn't confirm or deny it, but just sort of gave me that look like, you know, I can't talk about that. So that, and again, when you meet people face to face and you can gauge their reaction, to me, that's a lot more authentic than watching an interview, for example. And so when I get these feelings from people, and I'm pretty good at reading people's facial expressions, even their energy, even the way they put off if he were to say, oh, of course not. Even if he was blowing it off or lying, I think you could probably tell that maybe he just didn't want to talk about it. He didn't talk about it. Buzz Aldrin has punched people for confronting him, saying, here's a Bible. Would you swear on the Bible that you landed on the moon? And he won't do it, which is kind of suspicious. But one thing I talk about when I discuss humans in outer space is look at it three ways. Some people say that we can't leave even Earth's atmosphere, that outside of it on the way to the moon you encounter the Van Allen radiation belt, and it would have fried the Apollo astronauts, so they had to fake it. And admittedly, there are many strange things in some of the photographs and some of the circumstances of those flights that would probably make most people raise an eyebrow when you see two shadow sources on the sun. That's impossible. Why did they publish those photos? Maybe Stanley Kubrick did take some photos, and maybe they thought the moon shot wasn't going to work out and they didn't want to seem a failure in spite of the Russians putting up Sputnik first. They needed a success. So it was like a hedge. And they had these photos, and they're like, hey, these are actually better than our real ones. Well, let's just use them, not realizing that people would study them many years later and say, hey, this doesn't look right. Then, of course, there's the standard model that we did the moon shot and walked on the moon, came back. And people with very high integrity, too. That and Buzz Aldrin, I would say, is in that category. And certainly Edgar Mitchell, who started the noetic sciences. And I've done talks at the Petaluma campus. And for people to be this involved later in life when they could have moved on, but decided to make a stand and talk about getting men back into space. Buzz Aldrin wore that shirt, "Get your ass back to Mars," when he went down to Antarctica, to see this Illuminati Disneyland that they call it, which might be a giant ship in the ice that can be exposed. But back to my point on the three scenarios. So you've got humans have never left Earth's atmosphere. Scenario one. We did exactly what the government says, went to the moon, came back, never been out of orbit since. Or three, when you look at the cosmic disclosure stuff, Corey Goode stuff, backward engineering technology for over 70 years, scenario three is, yeah, humans have been out there. We've been all over the place. We've probably been to other planets like Mars and certainly the moon on several other occasions. In fact, it was probably the Third Reich who were the first spacemen on the moon. And so if they had that technology, in the 30s, and then those rocket scientists came here with Project Paperclip, there were two space programs working concurrently. This is data points that you pick up all over the place that they did. The NASA rockets and the space shuttle was the show for the public, but all the while they were developing these anti-gravity free energy craft that they did not want to disclose to the public for obvious reasons. So I guess my answer to the moonshot is I do think they went. And we did have this, what would be considered archaic technology by today's standards. But the biggest and the brightest and the best needed to do it. It was initiated by Kennedy, too, by the way.
Yes.
You can really credit Kennedy for the Apollo program. And he was going to be the disclosure president. This was part of the reason they had to take him out. He wanted to do away with the Federal Reserve. He even started printing $5 and $2 bill treasury notes that were printed in red ink. And Jim Mars, who passed away, he was at Contact in the Desert a couple of years ago. We had a great time one night having a few drinks with Mike Barra and Laura Eisenhower. A few of us speakers were all hanging out together. And Jim Mars says, yeah, I've got one of those $5 bills, those treasury notes that got Kennedy killed. Of course, he wrote the book called Crosshairs, which Oliver Stone based his movie JFK on. So I would take
there was quite a few reasons they wanted to take Kennedy out.
Oh,
you have the Cajun Mafia, because there were only two families in the country that was running liquor. and it was the Cajun Mafia, and it was the Kennedys. So they wanted him gone. So we know the reasons the government wanted him gone. But let me ask you this, Brad. Have you seen the video footage? And it's quite compelling to me, bro, that the driver did it with an air gun.
Greer, yeah, the driver Greer. That's what William Cooper said, too. And around the anniversary of the assassination, a couple years ago, the 50-year anniversary, I was putting it out on Facebook, and some people who do writing on, no way, it couldn't have been Greer. I think it was a concerted hit, and I wouldn't put it past the driver Greer, because he does kind of appear to turn around and do something like this.
And also, Brad, and also because if you think about this, I'm not trying to sway anyone's idea on this. I just know that when I saw the video, let's look at all the elements. I think there was multiple shooters, but I'm assuming from what I saw, it was a driver. Because
kill shot came from the driver,
right. The kill shot came from the driver. You can practice this all you want, but what you never figured into the equation, it was by human nature. When you turn around, your foot comes off the accelerator.
Yeah.
And then you see this nickel-plated weapon. Brad, think about this, or anyone out there. So if I'm in a convertible and someone is from the outside is shooting at me, logic says duck. In fact, you don't even have to think about it. You are ducking. She's getting out that car. I'm trying to run it past me. It just gives more credence to the fact that it was so close proximity to her. She just saw this man turn around and shoot her husband dead in the head.
Yeah.
And she's trying
like,
to get out.
Next? Yeah.
You're dogging right.
And of course, there are bullets coming from all over the place. Connolly, the governor, got hit. JFK originally was going, oh, he got shot right in the throat, chest, right here. Yes. And probably that's what's kind of stunned him from ducking. Witnesses say that the driver came to a complete halt, like right when they got to the kill zone. So that Zapruder film has been highly edited and changed. Wow. So yeah, those frame by frames aren't exactly how it goes.
So they kept it to a slow roll. They didn't come to a
kept it to a slow roll to make it look like because you come to a complete stop. Of course, everybody knows. And then just keep in mind the first photos after the assassination. Everybody's pointing up to the grassy knoll.
Right.
They're saying shots coming from there, and people were running up there to try to capture those shooters. And so to say that all the shots came from Texas Depository Building is patently false. In fact, there are even photos of Lee Harvey Oswald standing in the doorway. He had nothing to do with it. He was a patsy, like he said. I can't
begin to wrap my mind around the idea that Lee Harvey Oswald did it.
No. And I've been to Dallas. I went to Daly Square, and there's even a X on the road where Kennedy was hit, and you look at it and you're like, there's no way that you could be that accurate to hit him twice, and Connolly, and of course the magic bullet. That's just silly talk. It was a concerted hit. There were not only gunmen on the grassy knoll, but on the bridge overpass, and even the Daltex building from behind. I mean,
the car was never found. When the car went through that tunnel, it was never seen again. Is that correct?
Well, no, it took Kennedy to Parkland Hospital, and it had bullet holes in the windshield.
Okay.
And presumably other shots, and that car then disappeared after that.
Then it disappeared.
And the windshield magically came back, repaired, and no bullet holes in the body. So, yeah, it probably was a double that they brought back. But there are photos when it came to Parkland with the bullet holes in it. Jim Fetzer is a good friend of mine. He's done a lot of research on the Kennedy assassination too, and he's all over it.
Brad, you're a fantastic guest. Thanks for joining me today on Center of Light Radio spontaneously. It was a lot of fun, bro.
Oh, I really enjoyed being here, Keith. Thanks for accommodating my schedule.
Man, anytime you want to hang out on air, we can. Look, if you get something that comes down the pike and you got a juicy piece of knowledge, contact me. We'll light this machine up and we'll spread the message for sure. And also, if you would give your contact information once more, and also leave us with a final thought about whatever you see fit that people can maybe implement in their lives, be it something about becoming aware of something or something they can actually use as a tool.
Sure. Well, again, if you want to learn more about me and various projects I do, go to bradolsen.com. My publishing site is cccpublishing.com, where all my books are displayed and available to browse and purchase. Esoteric series, my YouTube channel. The Esoteric Circle is my radio show. And I'm going to be speaking at Contact in the Desert this weekend. I'm going to be giving my presentation at 8:30 in the morning on Saturday in the Atlantis room. And I'm also going to be on the UFO panel with Jimmy Church on Sunday. So if anybody's coming to this great event, please stop by and say hello. And I guess a final thought is this, that we are multi-dimensional beings. We have so much capacity to learn, to grow, and to adapt, and to use latent abilities, which I call superhuman abilities in my book, Future Esoteric, that we don't know anything about, such as how to open our third eye, the pineal gland, and use it to become multidimensional entities. So in many ways, our growth is stunted because we haven't been given the information, we haven't been trained properly from the time we were children to work on ourselves, much like a monk or an ascended master would have these superhuman abilities innately within them. So my final message is we have all that. We just have to know how to tap into it. And that's what the esoteric subjects are to me, is this is the age of the great unveiling. The screen is now open. All information is available to see. You just have to want to seek it. You know, you can take a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink it. And that's the actual nature of what an esoteric subject is. It is sought out and understood by only a select few. In fact, when everybody starts understanding it, the nature of the word changes. It then becomes exoteric. So while UFO studies and free energy technology and tapping into our abilities are still very much esoteric subjects, it takes someone with a very curious nature to tap into this information. And I'm there to help in my way to articulate what this information is all about. So I would invite your listeners to check out my books, namely Modern Esoteric and Future Esoteric. And when the third book comes out, probably in 2020, you'll see the final thoughts on the subject. But it was great having a discussion with you today, Keith, and getting a chance to dive into some of the subjects, and look forward to meeting you someday at one of these conferences maybe.
You can bet on that, brother. We're going to connect again. Thank you, Brad. I appreciate it greatly. Everyone, Mr. Brad Olsen here at Center of Light Radio today. Every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, you can find me sitting in this chair talking to phenomenal individuals just like Mr. Brad Olsen. I have no idea who I'm going to have on my show next week. I'm just sitting down now to start my calendar. Spread the word. Center of Light Radio is changing. New platform, as you can see on social media, as well as to a 2-hour program. Again, I want to say thanks to Mr. Brad Olsen, and I will be seeing you soon. When you lay down at night, you have nothing to do, might as well do something. Breathe with the intentions to connect to something. It's called infinity. It's called you at your essence. Play in the garden of soul. Live your life. Live in the light. Trying this new technology.
Good show, man.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Glad we banged that out.
We're still live, so people, this is what we do in the green room.
Okay.
I'm learning this technology. I wanted to put the video. We'll see you guys next week. Peace, love, and light on you. Dig it.